Good morning. 2011 Chevy HHR with the 2.2 LE8 engine. There's our VIN, complete as a check engine light. So let's do a code scan real quick. Alright, so it looks like we're dealing with a P0010, a P0011 for the intake cam position performance in the actuator solenoid control circuit. Pretty common failure on this engine, obviously. A couple low power codes and a loss comms with the instrument cluster. Let's take a look at our readiness monitors. Looks like they're all complete. So let's go ahead and get this off. Let me get this off of here. So it's a little bit of a process to take this cover off, so I'm just going to wrench this off camera so we can get access to the two solenoids. Now the two solenoids, as many of you know, are, I don't know if I'm even going to be able to show you, oh, right there. You can see the two connectors right there on top of the valve cover there, just to the right of the flex pipe for that intake pipe. So we got to get this cover off to get access to them. And then I'll pull up a wiring diagram just to show you the circuit. Pretty straightforward test. It's not going to be that difficult. We're also going to check the oil level and make sure that's not low. Okay. Again, we're going after the intake side, so checking the oil level. It looks full. Looks nice and clean. Smells a little rich with fuel, but nothing too crazy or unexpected. Alright, so it's off. Now, we're going to have the mass airflow disconnected when we're running this to check stuff, but take a look at the throttle body. That needs to be cleaned, and an idle relearn needs to be done. But our intake side is obviously this side, right? So this is our guy, this front one, and it's 2-wire. And I believe these are power side switched, if I remember right, but let me pull up a diagram quick. One other note though before we do that, what you want to do, you know, everyone does it their own way, but before I touch anything, I'm not touching a dang thing. I want to inspect this harness. You know, you can see where they run in and then they tie into this main one and it kind of comes back around. And you just kind of want to take a quick visual of any obvious signs of damage or rodents and what have you. So before you touch things, always do a quick visual. Alright, I'm going to bring you along here. Hit the wiring diagrams, system. What do we want? Engine performance. 2.2 VIN W. And we're looking for intake camshaft actuator. Intake camshaft position, actuator solenoid, top right of engine. We get a brown and a purple. So let's follow our purple up. 7, next diagram. 7, right to the PCM. Intake camshaft solenoid control. So our purples are control, and that is to our PCM. Let's see, we get our brown, which is 21. Or is that tan? Tan. It's gotta be, is that right? Brown. Brown comes up and over to 21. Is that 31, I'm sorry. So 31, intake camshaft solenoid return. Alright, so let me get the, I think we're going to go into some scan data quick here. Alright, before we get carried away, let's just do a quick clear flood and listen to this engine. Alright, that sounds good. Shut this radio off. Let's fire her up once. Now again, mass airflow is disconnected. Shut off this AC. So it's running smooth. I'm kind of just listening. I'm listening for, you know, chain noise or anything like that. Looks like our traction light, and that's probably because the mass airflow is disconnected. So let me go out and listen to the engine. So it sounds pretty good. I don't hear anything crazy. So I think the next step is to just pull up some scan data on these actuators and see what the computer's seeing. Going to engine data, cam actuator data. I'm going to jump in the car quick. Alright, so I'm going to customize this, deselect all. What I want is, I just want intake cam angle, desired intake cam degrees. So you can see here, intake cam angle degrees, desired intake. So this is what the computer is desiring, and this is what it actually is. Now these variances, like intake cam variance degrees, that's going to take the difference between the two. And then we're going to do the same thing for our exhaust side. And then this is our command percentage. Coolant, engine load, app, map. So for right now, that's all I want to look at. Graph view. So here's our desired 0%. Desired exhaust. So you can see they're both, right now they're both at 0, but there again, I'm not hitting the RPM at all. And 0 command, variance, command, variance. Okay, so let me show you as I raise RPM. So nothing, no change with RPM being raised. So let's try that with it in drive and my foot on the brake, obviously. And there you can see, there they moved. So again, look at the desireds. Okay, now let's look at our variances. Look at exhaust variance. 1, 2. Let's look at intake. 1. Okay. These are our actuals down at the bottom here. And then these are our commands, so watch the commands. Okay, so they're working. I guess we could look at, just kind of pay attention to those variances. Alright, so you can see now that it warmed up that now we're getting a desired of 8% on our exhaust and a desired of 10% on our intake. And these are our actuals down at the bottom, and they match. And the variances are 0 because the difference between the two is 0, right? So now watch as I give it a rev, and you're going to see that intake go to 1, 2. Now I want to pay attention to the exhaust side. 1, 1. Again, intake side. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay? So, where do we go from here? Well, based off my experience, we want to do, now again, it's cold, so we're gonna let it warm up. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get the ohm meter out. Obviously, the powers and the grounds are there, so based on this alone, because they are moving, or you know, the intake cam is actually able to phase, so is the exhaust. So the powers and the grounds I'm not too concerned about, even though we have a control circuit open code. I'm thinking that it's heat related or possibly a connector issue. So what I want to do is I'm going to disconnect it, and we're going to do an ohms check on these solenoids and compare the two, okay? What happens on these is the pins in the actual solenoid themselves will get worn and they'll wobble, and the resistance values will change, especially when the heat comes up, and then they'll go open circuit, you know, and that's when they flag those trouble codes and those performance codes. Plus we have some movement, we have some variance on that intake side, but that, I believe that's because we have a solenoid that's the issue. So it's the most common fail issue, guys. Could we have a phaser problem? Absolutely, but I'm leaning towards experience here. So let me get it warmed up, and then I'll get you back on. So just so you know, right now we're at 183 degrees. I'm gonna wait until we're up to full temp, okay? I guess one important note would be, like, if I was worried about like an actuator or, you know, an actual phaser problem, I would see this variance be really erratic, okay? And you can see as I'm like revving it, that 1 to 2 variance is nothing to be worried about based on my experience, guys. So we're definitely dealing probably with a solenoid issue here. Can't say that 100% until we test it, but just based off experience. I guess before we go into this, we're gonna do a resistance measurement on the solenoid itself. It's the easiest way to test these guys, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start here, and I'm gonna do a wiggle test of the harness and everything while I'm watching the variance for the intake cam. So I'm wiggling the connector, and what I want you guys to do is just pay attention. I'm wiggling the harness and the connector here right at the solenoid. And again, we're at 197 for temp. And as I go along the harness, now if we had a power or ground feed issue, because if you look, the intake cam angle right now is 10%, 11%, and the command is at what, 50% duty cycle, because these are duty cycled. Well, you know, that's how they hold them at whatever angle. But as I'm wiggling the harness, what I'm doing here is basically just using scan data. I'm not worried about a power, you know, I'm not worried about the circuit at all. I'm worried about the solenoid, because as you can see, all the way down to the ECU, I don't have any dropouts here, okay? If I had problems in the wiring and it's being duty cycled and commanded at 50% to keep it at a 10% desired angle, right? Because what's intake desired right now? 10%, right? You can see as I wiggle it, it is bouncing, okay? I'm wiggling the actual connector, and the actual is bouncing, and it's not picking it up on the variance. Now, if we look at the exhaust side, that one's at 8%. Let me wiggle that one. Now that one, guys, no movement as I wiggle it, none. This one here wiggles a lot more than it should, okay? And you can see that bouncing. So, resistance measurement is the next step, guys. We don't need to check the power. We don't need to check the control at all of this circuitry. We know it's good. It's obviously able to hold it. It's just bouncing. And I bet you as heat comes up, you know, and again, I don't have the cover on, I'm not driving it. That's what's causing our code to set. All right. So what I've got is I've got my front probes on the pins of the exhaust solenoid right now. And you can see we're at what, 13.4 ohms of resistance. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these, hold them down, and I'm going to wiggle them, just wiggle them back and forth gently. And you can see no change in resistance as I'm doing that, okay? Nice and steady at 13.4. I think our temp was at about, you know, I could put a thermometer on there, but that's what we want. Now let's look at the intake side. Alright, so I'm on the intake solenoid. Look at the resistance, guys. 34,000 ohms of resistance. 34k ohms. Okay, and I'm not even touching it. Now watch when I push down and wiggle. See that? Now this is a common problem. A lot of us know about this, but if you're new and you're testing these, that's what we want to do, okay? It's the easiest way. You can see as I move them, not steady like the exhaust side. The other thing you want to do is you want to take a peek at the actual terminals. I know that's really hard to see. You can take your your probes and do a pin drag. These are notorious for spreading and getting worn out as well. I'm not worried about the connector. Obviously we got a solenoid that is clearly faulty, but that's what it's going to need. It's going to need a new solenoid. Now a lot of times guys will replace these in pairs because once one's failing the other one's on its way, but you know, by all rights, this exhaust cam actuator is well within range. 12 to 14 ohms of resistance, nice and steady, not worried about it. So we're gonna get an intake camshaft actuator solenoid, and I'm gonna show you what the code setting criteria is for these codes so that we can confirm our repair, okay? Oh, and by the way, if you are concerned about the wiring in the control side, I've got another video on that. I'll link it in the description. You can watch that to check, to use the scan tool bidirectionally to check to see if your control is there, okay? Alright, so real quick, here's the codes we had. Current, historical, radio DTCs, the actual diagnosis, 1 hour. So, you know, you can see I wrote down my resistance values on the exhaust side, and that it was this at this temperature. Intake side, resistance at this temperature, and that it was varying with the wiggle test. Visual inspection, no obvious damage. Actuator solenoids, control and reference circuits are functioning, not concerned with the integrity of the circuit. Electronic throttle body's dirty, clean with the repair. Belt is worn. Notice that it's glazed and it was chirping under load, and then the cabin filter is pretty disgusting. So down here I got required repair. So all the yellow will basically be to fix the codes. My time for cleaning the throttle body, like 0.1, half hour for the solenoid, and then, you know, all this stuff needs to be done. Clear the DTCs, do a relearn, run the idle, crank variation relearn, reset the trims, road test and verify our repair. The belt, if they decide they want to do that, and then the cabin filter if they decide to do that now. Well, last step here, and this is all included obviously into my initial 1 hour diag, and we're not even, what, 18 minutes in. Probably a little longer than that. I'll probably be at about a half hour, you know, in between you turning the camera off. But what I'm going to do is show you that code setting criteria. Code setting criteria for this 1.0 and this 1.1. Alright, so if we read here, circuit system description, camshaft position actuator system enables the ECM to change the timing of the camshafts while the engine is operating. The camshaft position actuator solenoid valve signal from the ECM is a pulse width modulated. The ECM controls the cam position actuator solenoid valve duty cycle by controlling the amount of solenoid valve on time. The camshaft position actuator solenoid valve controls the advance or retard of each camshaft. The camshaft position actuator solenoid valve controls the oil flow that applies the pressure to advance and retard the cams. The ECM controls the actuator solenoid valves by supplying a 12-volt pulse width modulated signal, and the ECM supplies the ground to the low ref. Circuit conditions for running this DTC. The ignition voltage is between 10 to 18 volts. The ECM has commanded the camshaft position actuator solenoid valve on. DTCs P0010 and 0013 run continuously once the above conditions are met. The ECM detects that the commanded state of the driver and the actual state of the control circuit do not match for greater than 5 seconds. So that is what we're going to need to do. Not too hard, so it's going to run right away. Run right away after the repair. Okay. Now let's look at the 1.1 code. Okay, so for the 1.1 code, conditions for running this DTC. All these DTCs are not set. The ignition voltage, again, 11 to 18 volts. Engine is operating. The desired camshaft position is not changing greater than 4.5 degrees. The desired actual camshaft position actuator is commanded between 5 to 25 degrees. So there again, we're going to have to be off idle. We're going to have to go drive it. And then P0011 and 14 run continuously once the above conditions are met. So the ECM detects the difference between the desired camshaft angle and the actuals is greater than 5 degrees. The condition exists for greater than 10 seconds. So it takes 10 seconds to set this DTC. So we go out and drive this. I'll show you how to verify the repair once we get this part in. So let me get the parts on order. The other thing I want to mention too is we'll advise them, because I believe the spec is 8 to 12 ohms of resistance, but you got to remember heat changes that on these solenoids. So we'll advise them that we suggest, they do both solenoids based on our findings, but there isn't anything actually wrong with our exhaust side as far as we can tell, outside of it being at 13.5 ohms of resistance, which is what, 1.5 ohms, a little higher than what we would expect. But based on experience in the heat, I don't see anything wrong with the exhaust side. So I guess that's it, guys. So let me replace it and then we'll verify. Alright, well, everything got sold. Customer decided to do both the solenoids, and we will do the cabin filter. We will not do the belt at this time, and then we'll of course clean this throttle body. So I'm gonna go ahead and rip these out. Now before I did that, I cleaned everything up with some brake clean. I noticed the valve cover was starting to seep, but not too worried about it. Hit it with brake clean, blew it all out, got all the dust out, especially down here because we don't want dirt getting down in there when we remove the solenoid. So I'm gonna rip her apart. Alright, so we got the new solenoids here. We're going to do a quick check on a brand new GM Authentic solenoid. I got the intake one hooked up to my ohm meter, and you can see 10.4 ohms at room temp. 10.4 ohms at room temp. Let me try wiggling these. So wiggling them, absolutely no change. So let's check the exhaust. So we're on our exhaust one, which is our black top one. We got there 10.3, 10.4, moving a little bit, but that's my leads. So 10.4, brand new GM Authentic solenoids. Exhaust is black, intake is gray. So let's get the old ones out. I guess one note is do I feel bad about calling that exhaust one? Nope. I feel really good about it, actually. And the reason being, guys, is because I don't want this thing coming back for a check engine light for the exhaust one a month or 2 weeks from now. So that's why, based off experience, we usually do these in pairs. Could we have gotten away with just the intake one? Absolutely. But, I've seen it so much where the other one is right on its way. Just didn't flag trouble codes yet, so we're just going to kill two. We're going to kill that right now. We advised the customer, we left it up to them based off of our recommendation. They decided to go ahead and do both of them. So they're out. We're going to take a quick peek at the screens and make sure we don't see any debris. And I don't see any metal shavings or any debris on them. So now we're going to take a peek down the holes and make sure those screens down there aren't full of crap. And it's gonna be hard to see on camera, guys, but I'm telling you right now, there's nothing wrong down there. So next step is just to clean up down here before we put the new ones in. And I will put a light coat on the new O-rings. I'll put a light coat of dielectric grease. Well, actually, I'll probably just douse them in fresh motor oil before I slide them down in there and torque them to spec. Alright, everything's cleaned up back in where it's supposed to be. Time to clean the throttle body, and we'll take that off to do it. A little bit of carbon choke cleaner. Now when you spray it in there, and I use a horsehair brush, and that just cleans all that gunk right out. Try not to get it into the motor, so you don't want carbon choke cleaner getting into this motor. I'll show you how dirty this is in here. That's the back side of it. So that's why I take them out. It's a lot easier to clean it all out when they're out. And like I said, I use a horsehair brush and some carbon choke cleaner, and it'll clean it right off, get it nice and clean again. Alright, so it's nice and clean again. You can see I got all that gunk out of there. Backside nice and clean. Okay, so before I install this airbox, I'm going to put some dielectric on the grommets so they don't get real stuck on the engine from the heat. I usually will layer a real light coat of dielectric on anything rubber, and it helps prevent it from, you know, getting so seized on there where, you know, they start breaking when you're trying to remove them down the road. So she's back together now. Don't forget your mass airflow, because they're easy to forget on these. So make sure you plug it back in. Make sure you tighten that up. Make sure you tighten that up, because everyone forgets that. Wipe her down. Looks better than when we got it. Alright, new cabin filter's in. I'm not going to show you that. It's pretty straightforward. Time to verify repair. Okay, so I'm outside now with the car. We're going to clear all the codes out of it, and I'm wiping everything. Now, if you're new to this, you can go to Vehicle History to the scan tool, and you can see I've already got it up, but here's all my history of all my different vehicles that I've done, you know. But the HHR was the last one I had the scan tool hooked up to. Actually, it wasn't. I think I was on that Ford, but nevertheless, we're going to hit activate, and you'll see it come down here. We'll go to scanner. It's going to ask you to auto ID again. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is clear all codes. And I'm wiping everything. I want a clean slate. I'll let this finish. Alright, it's done. All the codes have been cleared. Key on, engine off, obviously. Go to into engine. We're going to go to functional tests, and you're going to see module setup. You're going to hit idle relearn reset, engine off, key on, continue. And once it's in here, it's not reset. You got to go up here, hit reset. You should hear your throttle blade outside reset. Okay, test complete, exit. All right, that's done. I do this every repair I do to a GM. Every repair, this process. Okay, open controls. Field trim reset. Up here, reset. Reset completed successfully. Exit. Okay, now at this point, I want to do a crank variation relearn. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cycle off, cycle on, and start the car. Now don't go revving it. Don't go doing none of that. Just let it idle until it reaches operating temperature, okay? And what you can do is go into crank variation relearn. And it's going to say set park brake, lock drive wheels, cycle ignition off to on. Just hit continue. Apply and hold brake pedal, start engine, idle till 158 degrees is reached, AC off, vehicle must remain in park neutral. So hit continue. Warning, in the next step, do not let engine over accelerate past fuel cutoff. Cutoff should occur between 4,000 and 5,000 RPMs. We're not up to temp yet, okay? But hit continue. You see how it gives you coolant temp? Just let it sit here, idle, until it hits 150 some degrees, okay? It comes up to temp. So I'm going to shut the camera off. Just, you know, I'm going to pause it and edit that part out. But once we get to that point, I'll show you how to, you can see even here, it says the coolant temperature is too low. Please allow the engine to warm. So it's going to tell you when you can do it. So once we get to that point, I'll get you guys back on. All right, so we're up to temp now, and you can see it's telling you to accelerate engine to wide open throttle, release throttle when the fuel off. So basically when it hits its rev limiter, we're at what, 172 degrees. It took about, I don't know, 3 minutes. But what I wanted to tell you is the reason I say don't rev the engine or do anything when you first start it up is because you did an idle relearn. on it, okay? Let it relearn. It's not going to relearn. It takes a while for a GM to relearn its idle, okay? It'll have to be driven, go through its drive cycle, whatever. But initially, when you first start it up, don't be revving it. Don't try to get it up to temp quick. You're going to screw it all up. Just let it run, and that's why I do it in this order. Just let it run until it comes up to temp. Now that we got a nice stable idle, I mean, we're idling at what? 660 to 670 RPM, okay? So now we're gonna give it a rev like it says, and it's gonna go till its rev limiter. And once you do that, it'll say test complete, crank variation learned successful. Hit exit. Okay, we're done. What I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna shut it down, let it sit for a few seconds, and start it back up. Okay? And I'm just gonna let it idle, the idle come back down to stable. Now, we're done. What we wanna look at now is our data after the repair. Now remember, we reset everything, so there is some learning taking place. So we could look at field data just to look at trims. Now, this is overkill, I know that, but it's nice to look at good systems, okay? You can see our short-term trim, about -1, 2, -3. Long-term is running a little negative, so it's running a little rich, okay? And that could be the PCV, you know, that fuel that probably was down in the oil. I'm not worried about it. I'm gonna let it idle. It's in closed loop. I just wanted to show you guys that. We could look at our TPS signal, our TPS percentage. You can see it's at 5%. Now, I didn't show you the percentage before, but I would bet you, based on experience, that baby was probably at 10 to 12%. It's usually the case when they're dirty like that. So it's gonna run a lot better. It's gonna run, you know, where it should be. That's why I always do that on GMs, okay? Let's go to the cam actuator data and take a look at that. Now, I know this is fixed, guys. I know it's fixed, 100%. So we're back out to our menu, cam actuator data. We're just gonna look at them same PIDs again. Custom. Deselect all. Intake cam angle. Exhaust cam angle. Desired exhaust, desired intake. Exhaust variance. Intake variance. And the 2 duty cycles, okay? Let's see. I think that was it, right? We could look at desired idle, and we could look at actual RPM, and you'll see if that matches. Let's go to the graph view. So desired idle, 672, and you can see the RPM is kind of bouncing right now because it's still trying to learn where its happy spot is, and it will eventually level out. It takes a while on GMs. Okay, so exhaust cam percentage, 43, 44%. These are command duty cycle percentages, all right? Let's look at our variances. Exhaust cam variance of 0, intake cam variance of 0. Cam angle on the exhaust is 8% right now, 10% on our intake, okay? And then here, that's the desired intake, desired exhaust, 8 and 10, 8 and 10, actual 8 and 10, okay? So let me bring up the RPM and let's watch our variances. Now, I'm gonna tell you that 1 you're seeing there, that is what we want. 1 is okay, okay? All right. Put it in gear, hold our foot on the brake. Again, watching the variances. Well, you can watch everything, hopefully. You can see all that. You can see the intake is not bouncing to 2 anymore. Okay? Now, exit. Back. Codes menu. DTC status, okay? We're going to type in our code. This is unique to GM P0010. Let's see if it passed. Search. This ignition cycle passed. Since clear, passed. Last test, passed. History, no. Mill requested, no. So the 1-0 already passed this ignition cycle. Let's check our 1-1 code, okay? See if that one passed. And I really do like this about GM, okay? So I could actually do another ignition cycle if I really wanted to, but I know it's fixed, okay? So I really, at this point, guys, I'm done. I don't need to test drive it, nothing. I know it's good. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Hold on a second. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I know it's kind of long video, but I'm trying to like teach more than just a simple diagnosis of a solenoid problem on a GM. This is kind of how I go through my diagnostic process, how I write up a work order, you know, kind of a lot of things all wrapped up in one. So everyone does it different. Obviously, this took me way longer than what it normally would, but I'm sacrificing my lunch break in order to knock out a video. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. If you have questions, comments, concerns, or anything to add that I might have missed, please do so. I know I didn't show you the after wiggle test on the solenoid, but when I wiggled that cam actuator's solenoid's connector, a lot more snug, a lot more tight. We looked at the resistance differences. So if you run into this issue, you know, now you have the tools. I will link, like I said, in the link to my video where I actually used the scan tool to do the bidirectional checks of the control system. I think it was on a 2.4 maybe, but it doesn't matter. It's similar. So check that out. I was using my Veris probably back then, but it doesn't matter. Same thing. Have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them down. But thanks for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you on the next